Hey everybody! Custom mock-ups are a great way to show your customers and clients different colorways of shirts and designs and have them look realistic and professional. In this tutorial, I will show you how to make these mock-ups using your own imagery in Photoshop. All the files I use and create in this exercise will be linked down below and downloadable. As you see, I have a model here wearing a V-neck style shirt. This is what the template's going to be. And the idea is when we're done, we'll be able to color this shirt any color that we want. And then we'll be able to mock up and lay out art on the shirt consistently and make it look as realistic as possible. This will come in handy. So many times you want to mock up a V-neck, you always have good collateral. So let's begin by going to the Properties menu and using Photoshop's Remove Background feature. This works really quickly and does a really good job. As you see, it created a layer mask, so the background is still there the whole time, but we've got a layer mask that's hiding the background. So I'm going to Command click and select the old marching ants selection of this model in the foreground. Now I'm going to click on the model and go up to Layer, New Layer via Copy. So this is just going to give me the model by himself. And I'm going to hide this. We don't need this anymore at this point. And the next thing I want to do is create a mask of just the shirt, because that's the only thing we're going to recolor. And there's several ways of doing this. We can use the magic wand and start clicking here. That'll work really well. It really just depends on what you're used to. You can even draw a path and turn that into a selection. Because this is so green and there's nothing else that's really going to compete with this green, I'm going to go up under Select and hit Color Range. And you can see the color range when you click anywhere on this shirt. It does a pretty good job of just getting this good from the start. Once you use this eyedropper to click on the shirt somewhere, you can see depending on where you click it, it changes a little bit. You can always knock up the fuzziness. You're looking for this to be solid white here. And without getting the fuzziness too high, go over to this eyedropper with the plus icon. Now when you click on different places that aren't quite white, you see how they're disappearing. So you just go there and select. Now that looks pretty good right from the get-go. We've got about everything that we want. I see a little bit creeping in here. I'm gonna knock this fuzziness down a little bit. We'll be able to get rid of that in the end. Go ahead and click OK, and you see this has done a really good job. I see some little crumbs here. We'll be able to get that. So I'm going to use the magnifying tool now to get in close and start checking around the perimeter and doing a little bit of cleanup. Once again, there's a couple different ways of doing this. You can jump over here to the quick mask mode, hit the eraser tool, get the size up on it, and just erase some of this mask out of here. And then when you jump out of the quick mask, you see that took care of that. You can use that, or you can use the lasso tool. I see this little stray one up in here. Let's see what's going on with that. Now I'll use the brush tool to just paint where it's kind of slipped up on his neck right there. Then back out of the quick mask. But basically this is your chance to really go in and sort of refine this. And you have to make decisions. Do I want to take this and make this part of the dynamics, that little piece that's kind of hidden behind there? I don't think it'll hurt either way, so I'm just going to leave it the way it is. I do see something that's odd. This is from the model shot. There's a little string or something going on in there. So I'm just going to quickly just grab the clone stamp tool and get rid of that. I like these things to be perfect as possible. Double click on magnifying glass. This brings you out to 100%. So I like what I've got here as far as masking the shirt. So once again, now that I have just the shirt mask, I'm going to go up under Layer, New Layer via Copy. Command J for those of you following the shortcuts at home. So there, we have it right here, right now. If we want to change this to different colors, the best way to do that in a template form is to go ahead and go to adjustments and desaturate this. And this base gray will allow us to inject color into it with an adjustment layer. And if we look at the levels, Command L, we can see that all of the color of this gray is right in here. Here's your shadow colors, here's your midtones, and here's your highlights. So you can see this is lying right here in the midtone area, and that's perfect for where we want that gray to be from the start. So you always want to look at that. That's where you want it. Okay, now that we have this, it's time to start making some adjustment layers. So I'm going to command click on layer 3 here. That's going to select it. I'm going to go ahead and double click and just rename this layer shirt. Now I'm going to come down and make an adjustment layer, and I'm going to hit the black and white adjustment. Because I had a selection going on, it automatically made a mask. So that's all it affects is this shirt, as you can see the mask here. And in the properties menu, we need to select on this tint right here, and as soon as I did that, you can see the color of the shirt changed. So if we wanted to make this color blue, we can pick a blue. And the first thing you're going to notice is, see this color that I picked and the shirt's not there. It's because we're not done yet, but we'll get it to this nice rich blue. So we need to make another adjustment layer to make that happen. And so we'll go ahead and do that now. Once again, I'm going to command click on this shirt layer, and I'm going to make another adjustment layer, and this time I'm going to call it levels. Okay, this is where you're going to lighten and darken the shirt, and you can see how easy it is to lighten and darken the shirt just by tweaking this, right? So you can play around with this, but you're usually going to play somewhere here in the middle ones, right in here somewhere. So that's how you manipulate a grayscale shirt to be what color you want it to be. If we click this layer back on, or even the bottom layer, you'll be able to see that if we take this mask off that it originally made, the model's sitting here on that beautiful background. I'm going to go ahead and leave that mask in there so that we can put our own background in there if we choose to do so. So the next thing is to mock up a design on this shirt and make it look natural. And the best way to do that and to get it proportional to your art is to place a grid on here. So over in Illustrator, I've made this grid that I use all the time. This represents 15 inches wide. These are each a 1 inch square, a 15 inch wide by 19 inch. And that's the screen print area that our shop uses. And 2.5 inch drop is standard on a regular t-shirt, a little bit higher on a v-neck. But I'm literally going to select this whole grid here and copy it, and then jump back to Photoshop. And I'm going to get up here, select up here so it lands on top. I'm going to paste this as a smart object right on top here. Now initially I want to blow this up really big. We're going to scale it down in a second here, but initially you want this to be pretty big because every time you place a piece of art on here, it's going to be relative to what we first brought it in as. And you're going to see that. So this is pretty good. It's pretty good size. It'll be easy for us to work. So I'm going to hit return. Now, this art layer, I'm going to go ahead and name that place art here. We need to right click on this and change this to a smart object. Now that it's a smart object, it'll always remember when we dive into this file that it was this big initially, but any other transformations that we make to it, we'll be able to scale it down on the shirt. I'm going to show you that now. So Command T is transform, and I'm going to bring this down and size it up on the shirt. Now you can see he's a little crooked here, so we're going to illustrate that. I'm first just trying to really get the width to match the width of the shirt. And I'm going to go down here and turn it some, because he's standing kind of crooked, but that's okay, because in the end you don't want the art to be straight on there and him to be crooked. You see there's a center line here. Probably going to have to cheat a little bit to keep that center, but that looks pretty decent right there, so I'm going to hit return. Now another transformation that you can do with this image is a perspective warp. And if you've never used this perspective warp before, it's a little tricky, but you just have to kind of play with it. And you drag these points around the perimeter of your image, and then you hit return. It's giving me some help here that I don't need. And then you can see, if you start moving these points around a little, that it's changing the perspective, because this guy's, you know, he's not only sideways, but his chest is a little closer to us than his midsection. And I'm just going to illustrate that in this perspective a little bit. You can see how it's kind of distorting this a little bit. So I'm just going to manipulate this here. That looks good right there. Okay, so we have the grid on here, and let's say we want to place some art. Let's jump back over to Illustrator. I've got this file from one of our friends, customers, that we did for a t-shirt, and so you see this is the art here. There's no white in it, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this, jump back to Photoshop, and then here's the trick. You double click, and because it's a smart object, it brings up the size that we originally placed it. Now when I paste this art in here, I'll be able to scale it up and use this scale that I've set over here, knowing that the art's about 12 inches wide, and the drop, this is a V-neck, so I'm going to bring it up a little bit higher than my standard, because it is a V-neck and the shirt's already, the neckline's a little bit lower. So that looks good right there. Now, I've got this art on the grid, and obviously we don't want to show this grid anymore. And when you double click into a smart object, you can manipulate it and then resave. So I'm hiding this art layer right here, this grid layer rather. And then when I close and hit save, it's going to show up on the shirt. And you can see, for my likings, it's still a little bit low, but I'm going to go with it for now. We can always manipulate that. But I just wanted to show you how this grid worked like this. Now, on this particular model, you see there's some wrinkles in here that would normally affect, this wouldn't be a nice, perfect curve in here because of the shading and the topographical map-like qualities of a human, if you will. So we want to be able to illustrate that to make it look even more realistic. So I'm going to go ahead and jump back and throw the grid back on here until we're done, because the grid's really going to show what we're about to do here. So I've got my grid on here. I'm going to hide this grid, and at this point it's good to just save this file how it is. Right now it started out as a PNG file, so I'm going to save this file as V-neck PSD. It's already got it there for me. Okay, so now that we're saved, I'm going to ditch everything in this file except for this shirt here, and you'll see what we're going to do is a displacement map that's going to add a little extra warpage to make this look more natural. Displacement map basically looks at the shadows and the highlights in this and creates a warp to go along with that, and it's really cool. I love doing these, And you want to start with a gray file that is not only gray here, but you literally have to come up under the mode here and turn it to grayscale. Once that's done, the first thing I do, and this is based upon experience, is go ahead and go into levels, and I'm going to adjust the brightness and contrast. Now this use legacy, I click it, I'm old, I figure it's for me, but it's the old way the contrast worked. And we can see here as I tweak, the contrast gets higher and higher. And I like that contrast. That's going to help the warp work a lot better with some extra contrast in there. Now, if we get in really close, this shirt's a little bit grainy, and I don't want that to come out, the graininess to come out in this displacement map. So we're going to do a blur on it. Once again, this is just a trick I learned that just works better. This blur somewhere in the high 3s, low 4s usually works. You can see I'm going to go with 4.4 here. And now that I have this just like this, I'm going to save as, and I'm going to take the V-neck name and just add displacement to it and save it. Okay, now I need to open up that V-neck that I just made, the full color one, not the PNG, but this one. Okay, so this displacement map here, we can close this. We're not going to be using that, only to import this in. Back up to your art layer, and I'm going to turn it on so we can see what's going on here. Once this is selected, we're going to add this displacement map. And this is the coolest part. Under Filter, Distort, you see Displace here. So it brings up this little menu here. You can start with 10 and 10. You really just have to play around with it, but you know, somewhere between 8 and 10 is a good place to start. And just leave everything as you see it selected here. When you say OK, it brings up the Finder. This is where you're going to select what we just made here. And as soon as we do, it brings it in. You see what's changed here. Because this grid, and this is why I brought the grid back in here, you can see that it's distorted now. So any art that's lay on this same layer would distort the same way. And it's distorting according to the shadows in there. Now this looks a little bit extreme. I'm going to go ahead and double click on Displace again, and I'm going to bring that down to like 9 and 9. This is something you just have to play with, and you have to pick the map again. It's a little less harsh, but now when I come back over here, my art that I used earlier is still here, so I'll select it and hide this. Now there's my opportunity to go ahead and bring this up a little bit more, close and save. Okay, and if we get in here closer, you can see it's not perfectly round. It's distorting just like the shirt. So this is pretty much ready to go, or looks good and ready to use. Now sometimes when you're doing these different styles, there may be a heathered version, some sort of poly cotton blend, and this shirt looks like a solid shirt. So I've got a little trick for that too. Once again, click on here on your shirt layer and command click, so I'm grabbing it, and then I'm just going to click new layer. So this layer is empty, but I have the selection. So Shift F5 brings up the fill. I'm going to fill it with 50% gray here. And it looks blue because of these things on top here. If we hide all this, you can see that's gray. So this 50% gray, go under Filter, Noise, Add Noise. And what you want to select here is somewhere in this 14, 15, 16% range, and monochromatic. So that just means colors of gray, because that's all we really need to do here. Once we have what you see I've selected here, once you have that, hit OK. And now under this layer, I'm going to go ahead and name that Heather. I'm a little behind on naming my layers here, so we'll get that done here. But name that Heather, and then instead of normal, we're going to go to linear light. Now this still looks really grainy here, but that's okay because we're going to bring the opacity down somewhere in the 30s. And this is where you really have the liberty to do what best looks to your eye. You know, sometimes I get in here and I look at this and I pull this up and I'm like, that's still pretty grainy. So I'll come up here and add another filter on top of it, and I'll blur it a little bit more. Not something extreme like that, but just a little bit so that it still looks heathered, but not super heathered. Okay, so this is something you can just turn on and off depending on what style of garment that you're mocking up, but it comes really comes in handy when you're trying to pull off all these different colored garments. So now that we inject the color back in there, there's our design. This garment looks more heathered at this point, so that works really, really well. The last thing I'm going to do to make this so when I come back to it the next time, I'm going to click on this levels. Remember, that's where we were adjusting how light and dark a shirt was. And I'm going to rename it that, lighten / darken. And I'm going to name the black and white adjustment layer color here, because that's where you're picking this tint and this color here. And like I said, it's pretty easy to change this up, you know, how you want to, all right in here with these two tools. So we're gonna, boom, just leave it at that. Now, as a bonus, there's another thing that you can do that try to make it look more realistic. Up here on the place art layer, you can take a little bit of opacity out of it. You just have to be careful with it if you don't want to, you know, make it look too transparent, unless that's the print process you're going for, like a vintage or a faded type look. This is pretty much done at this point. Any job that you get, when you're done with it, you can add another layer and drop in a background or fill it with whatever you want, pattern, photo, and start making collateral off of this. So I hope you enjoyed this. All the files that I used are in the link below this video, so you can download the PNG that I started with, the grid that's in Illustrator, and the final file I'll also drop onto the drive. So thanks for watching. If you like and subscribe, that would be great. I'd like to keep doing these type of videos for people that are in the screen printing industry or mocking up stuff. So thanks again, and see you soon.